I vividly recall the day I first encountered him. Arthur Blackwood. He strode into the main office with an air of entitlement, as if the world were his personal oyster. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, a Patek Philippe watch glinting on his wrist, his confidence radiating from his 6'4" frame, and he clearly had absolutely no idea what our department actually did. "Call me Art," he announced, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his steely gray eyes. "I prefer things streamlined, rapid, and highly efficient. We're going to achieve remarkable things, starting immediately." A pregnant pause followed, then the kind of forced, perfunctory applause one only encounters in corporate gatherings and awkward school plays. I remained silent, arms firmly crossed. I had been with Stellar Tech Solutions for over 8 years. I had weathered 2 CEO changes, 3 major restructuring initiatives, and a hostile takeover attempt. I understood the corporate game inside and out. But Arthur, well, he was about to receive a significant lesson. The first week was absolute pandemonium. Arthur immediately scrapped our established project review meetings, replacing them with what he called vision strategy summits. By Thursday, he dismissed 3 mid-level managers, 2 via unceremonious email. Then he started making significant alterations to our flagship software, despite demonstrating a complete lack of understanding of the underlying system architecture. That software, by the way, was my creation. 6 years prior, following a near-catastrophic failed acquisition, I single-handedly designed and implemented a new, state-of-the-art back-end infrastructure. It was streamlined, exceptionally secure, and highly scalable. And I didn't merely design it. I secured a patent for the system under my own name. A protective measure, strongly suggested by the previous CEO, Amelia Hayes, who famously declared, "Sarah, if you ever leave, we'll be pleading with you to return." This crucial detail was, naturally buried deep within my employment contract. Just another clause most executives never bother to read. But Arthur hadn't read a word. Diminish, discredit, dismiss. I maintained my composure, as I always do. But I meticulously documented every interaction, every decision, every slight. Then came Friday morning. Arthur sauntered into my office, leaning against the doorframe, with the contrived nonchalance of a poorly written corporate drama, and said, "Sarah, can we chat?" I indicated the chair opposite my desk. He remained standing. "I'll be direct," he stated, employing that tone men often use when they mistakenly believe honesty is a gift. "You've been here a considerable time, perhaps too long. Things are changing, and we require individuals who can adapt to a faster pace." I arched a skeptical eyebrow. Meaning your employment is terminated, effective immediately. "We've concluded your position is redundant. You'll receive a severance package, of course. HR has the necessary paperwork." His delivery was so practiced, so smug, that I nearly laughed. Instead, I reclined in my chair and studied him intently. He had absolutely no idea, no inkling of what I owned, no awareness of the single line in my contract that would soon become his undoing, no comprehension that, without my explicit written consent, the company could not legally utilize the system that powered 85% of its operations. But I didn't mention any of this. I simply offered a calm, polite, and deliberate smile. "Understood," I said, rising to extend my hand. He didn't take it. He merely nodded curtly and turned away, already seemingly finished with me. As he departed, he tossed one final, dismissive remark over his shoulder. "I'm certainly not going to waste money on an incompetent employee whose best days are 5 years behind her." My smile remained unwavering. "Good luck, Art," I replied. He paused at the doorway, likely taken aback by my unflappable demeanor. Then he left. I gathered my belongings, slowly, methodically. A few personal items, a small succulent I'd miraculously kept alive for 6 years, and a USB drive containing nothing but photographs from our last team retreat. As I walked through the open plan office, several heads turned. Some colleagues looked away, embarrassed. Others offered small, sympathetic nods. No one spoke. That's how fear operates in environments like this, silently, insidiously. By the time I reached my car, my hands were trembling, not from sadness, but from the surge of adrenaline coursing through me. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was intensely curious. How long would it take them to realize the gravity of their actions? I knew the answer. Monday. The weekend unfolded like a slow, gathering storm, quiet, heavy, and charged with anticipation. I didn't inform anyone of my dismissal. Not my sister, who frequently remarked that I worked excessively. Not my closest friend, who would undoubtedly have arrived armed with red wine and a meticulously crafted 5-point revenge plan. And definitely not my ex-husband, who once described me as overly intense and married to my career. I needed silence, solitude, clarity. On Friday night, I took a long walk through the city, past the tranquil cafes and darkened bookstores, allowing the cool night air to numb the sting of betrayal. I wasn't mourning the job, I was mourning the insult, the sheer arrogance, the preposterous notion that someone who had never written a single line of code could waltz in, dismantle years of dedication and sacrifice, and declare it redundant. The patent listed under my name, the crucial clause, reviewed and notarized, a meticulously worded section granting me complete control over the architectural system I had painstakingly built. Nexora had a licensing agreement for its use, an agreement requiring my express participation for renewal, updates, or scaling. And that agreement, it was due for renewal on Monday. A small, almost imperceptible laugh escaped my lips, not because it was humorous, but because the timing felt almost poetic. Notice of intellectual property usage expiration. Immediate attention required. Sarah Miller, inventor, Nexora backend architecture, patent number US 7890123B. I copied their legal counsel and our former CTO. And yes, Arthur, then I closed my laptop and went for a run, 4 miles through the misty city streets, dodging tourists and street vendors, feeling the tension slowly draining from my body. Sarah, we're hoping to clarify a few details concerning your separation agreement. Another from legal. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to discuss the terms of your previous agreement with the company. And finally, late that night, an email from Arthur himself. Subject, urgent, contract, misunderstanding. Sarah, I believe there's been a significant miscommunication. I'd like to speak with you personally to clarify this matter and resolve the situation before business resumes on Monday. Please call me immediately. Arthur. The unmistakable tremor of panic. I didn't respond. I let them stew. I allowed them to arrive at work Monday morning and confront the stark reality that the company's entire infrastructure, the scheduling system, the CRM, the API integrations, the automated reporting, the client access portals, depended on a license they no longer possessed. I didn't crave revenge. I desired respect. And if that required a flurry of panicked emails and legal fire drills, so be it. By Monday morning, I had been awake for hours. Coffee brewed, phone fully charged, laptop open. I sat on my couch, clad in leggings and an oversized hoodie, watching the clock tick toward 8 a.m., the official start of the Nexora workday. My inbox exploded. System error. Back-end authentication failed. Urgent. Clients cannot access dashboard. Sarah, please call me now. From Arthur. Then a text from Chloe, a former colleague in product development. Chloe, did you do this? Please tell me you did this. Arthur's losing it. The entire system is down. Meetings canceled. Clients are calling non-stop. The board's been informed. I smiled, not out of malice, but out of a profound sense of clarity. This wasn't sabotage. This was the inevitable consequence of those in positions of power, assuming competence without evidence and dismissing value without understanding it. 31 a.m., my phone rang. This time I answered. Arthur's voice, strained and laced with barely concealed panic, crackled through the speaker. Sarah, we need to talk. I had no idea about the patent situation. Let's get you back in the office and I gently interrupted him. I'm happy to discuss this, Arthur, but not regarding a job. We're now discussing licensing. As external partners. Silence. Arthur's voice dropped lower. His words tight with frustration. Sarah, he said again, let's not make this personal. Oh, I replied, my voice even. It's not personal. It's purely contractual. Then I hung up, and just like that, the real negotiation began. On Monday morning, not through the employee entrance, but through the main lobby. My heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. A sound unfamiliar, after years of slipping in unnoticed with a travel mug and laptop bag. This wasn't a return, it was a reintroduction. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. Ms. Miller? I smiled. I have a meeting with legal. She nodded quickly, clearly disoriented, and picked up the phone, her hand trembling slightly as she dialed. I could feel the palpable shift in the room's energy, the way people paused mid-conversation. The furtive glances from employees pretending not to notice. Take the elevator to the 7th floor, she said. They're expecting you. As I stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, I caught my reflection in the mirrored panel. Confident, unshakable, but beneath the surface, my heart was pounding, not with fear, but with laser-like focus. I had spent the weekend preparing for this moment, not merely to defend my work, but to firmly establish my true value. When I entered the legal conference room, the atmosphere was distinctly cautious. The company's general counsel rose to greet me, followed by 2 members of the internal legal team, and a senior advisor I recognized from a previous merger. Arthur was absent. I took a seat at the far end of the table. Let them come to me. Sarah, the general counsel began, his voice smooth but tightly controlled.
We appreciate you coming in.
We want to address this matter swiftly and amicably.
Of course, I replied.
I'm always in favor of efficient resolutions. I assume you've reviewed the licensing agreement? He nodded. We have. Your claims are valid. The system patent is registered under your name, and according to the agreement, continued use without your consent constitutes a violation.
And the renewal date?
Expired at midnight, as stipulated. There was a pause. Then he leaned forward. We'd like to propose a retroactive licensing extension. 1 year. Same terms. Full operational access.
I smiled. That won't suffice.
A murmur rippled through the room. The advisor scribbled something in his notepad. I'm not here to revert to the previous terms, I continued calmly. I'm here to renegotiate. Fairly, you're currently experiencing a system outage, correct? They hesitated. I've been informed it's affecting all client-facing platforms, internal reporting, and developer access. The general counsel finally nodded.
Yes.
Then let's discuss figures, I stated. I require $1.5 million for the next 12 months, non-exclusive, renewable quarterly, complete system support through me directly, or a consulting team of my choosing, and a public acknowledgement of the patent in all company documentation. It wasn't a bluff, it was a market rate figure based on the system's reach and impact. The stunned silence in the room told me they hadn't anticipated my meticulous preparation. Not like this. One of the legal associates cleared his throat. That's a substantial increase. It reflects the value, I corrected. Something this company has seemingly forgotten how to assess. The general counsel leaned back in his chair. We'll need to present this to the board. I'll wait, I said simply. But for your awareness, each hour of delay impacts client trust, your reputation, and your stock performance. I advise prompt action.
They didn't argue.
D.A.M. While waiting outside the conference room with a bottle of water and my phone on silent, I spotted Arthur pacing the hallway beyond the glass wall. He hadn't yet seen me. When he finally did, his expression froze, then shifted from confusion to something else. Recognition. He approached me, his steps slower than usual. Controlled. Sarah, he said, forcing civility into his voice. I didn't anticipate you'd come in person. No, Arthur, I replied evenly. You didn't anticipate many things. I think this has escalated unnecessarily, he began, hands shoved into his pockets, attempting a casual demeanor. We should have had a conversation before involving legal counsel. You mean before you terminated my employment? I raised an eyebrow. That decision was based on incomplete information. No, I said, standing. That decision was based on ego, and now you're facing the consequences. He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't give him the opportunity. I'm not angry, Arthur. I'm simply finished being underestimated. I've meticulously documented everything, the patent, the licensing terms, your email terminating my employment without cause. I'm not here to engage in a dispute, I'm here to negotiate. If you wish to salvage this deal, and perhaps your job, you'll allow legal to handle this professionally. His jaw tightened. I walked past him toward the meeting room. Oh, and Arthur, I said, turning over my shoulder. Good luck. That word again. Luck. Something I've never required. By noon, the conference room was again occupied, but the energy was markedly different, tighter, sharper. The board hadn't joined us, but I could feel their presence hanging heavy in the air. The stakes had undeniably changed. What was initially a miscommunication had morphed into a full-blown legal crisis, with operational ramifications and significant shareholder implications. I didn't flinch. The general counsel sat directly across from me, looking less composed than before. Loosened tie, clenched jaw. We've reviewed your proposal, he began. And while we find the terms aggressive, accurate, I corrected. A 6-month contract. Renewable quarterly, as you proposed. Public acknowledgement. However, we'd prefer to phrase it as technical collaborations, rather than a full patent credit. I leaned forward. No. His brows rose. Excuse me? I insist on a clear, unambiguous public statement. System designed and patented by Sarah Miller. No spin. No sanitized language. This company relied on my architecture, for 6 years, and you've all profited immensely from it. I'm not accepting an anonymous role so Arthur can preserve his reputation." The room fell silent. The associate to my left glanced at his notes, but remained silent. The advisor scribbled furiously. The general counsel adjusted his glasses. "We'll bring this before the board." "Do so," I responded. "And while you're at it, I advise complete transparency. The SEC doesn't take kindly to undisclosed licensing conflicts that compromise system functionality." That landed like a sledgehammer, because that's the unspoken truth, how the failure of a single system, especially due to intellectual property misuse, can shatter investor confidence, trigger audits, or worse, lead to delisting threats. I knew their playbook better than they realized, and now I had my own. As I exited the conference room, I spotted Chloe again, this time near the elevators. She gave me a look that was equal parts shock and admiration. "They're calling you the firewall upstairs," she said with a grin. I smiled faintly. Better than being labeled redundant. She laughed, then lowered her voice. "People are talking, Sarah. Arthur's in full spin mode, telling the board it was all a misunderstanding, claiming you never disclosed the licensing expiration. That's a fabrication," I said calmly. "But let him speak. Truth doesn't require volume." Chloe leaned closer. "Everyone saw the memo. You've got Seed Legal involved before the deadline. There's paperwork everywhere. The interns are whispering about it like it's Watergate." I didn't immediately respond. My mind was already racing ahead, to the second wave. Because reclaiming control wasn't enough. I wanted accountability. System licensing, public statement, and leadership conduct. If this is how he manages internal resources, how do you expect him to handle external partners, vendors, or regulatory agencies? That afternoon, the response arrived, not from the chair, but from a senior board liaison. "Sarah, thank you for your clarity and professionalism. Please know that we take this matter very seriously. We'll be conducting an internal review, including all the documentation you've provided. In the interim, we support the licensing arrangement and expect it to be finalized within 48 hours, under the terms you've proposed. We regret that the company's leadership failed to recognize your contribution sooner." I stared at the message for a moment, then leaned back in my chair. It wasn't a public apology, but it signified a crucial shift, not only in the narrative, but in the power dynamic. "Arthur's freaking out. The board's meeting early tomorrow. His assistant said he's been making frantic calls, trying to control the narrative. Let him try." I possessed the truth, and a paper trail far longer than his resume. The next day would be more than a licensing agreement. It would be a reckoning. 23 a.m. I was informed of their decision. Not by Arthur. Not by legal. But by the board chair himself. The email was brief, but the tone was unmistakable. "Please join us for a closed session at 11 o'clock. Your insights will be invaluable to the ongoing discussion." That word again, invaluable. 2 weeks prior, I was incompetent. Now, I was invaluable. The irony was almost comical, were it not so deeply revealing. 5 a.m. I entered the executive boardroom, on the top floor of the Nexora building. A room I had only visited once before, years ago, when presenting a system upgrade roadmap to the previous CEO. Back then, I stood in the corner, overlooked. Today, I walked directly to the chair designated for me. No hesitation. Arthur was already seated on the opposite side, arms crossed, his phone face down on the table like a prop he wasn't permitted to touch. His tie was impeccably knotted, his smile meticulously rehearsed, but the apprehension in his eyes, that was genuine. The board chair opened the session with formalities, then turned to me. "Sarah, thank you for joining us. We've reviewed the licensing terms and your documentation. We'd appreciate hearing your perspective, briefly, before we deliberate." I nodded. Of course, listen or bulldoze. Arthur chose the latter. Arthur shifted in his seat, but didn't interrupt. He labeled me incompetent, dismissed me without review, then ignored the legal ramifications of the infrastructure he relied on to maintain the company's operations. Worse, he only began to listen after the system failed, after the servers went dark, and clients started calling. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Everything I did, every system I built, was designed to protect this company. But no system can protect you from arrogance. And if your CEO doesn't understand the architecture of your operations or the value of the people behind them, you're not just at risk legally, you're at risk fundamentally. Silence. Then one board member leaned forward. "What would you do if you were in his position?" I smiled, subtly. I wouldn't be in his position. I'd be alongside someone who understands product development, company culture, and legal compliance. I'd establish a leadership model that values collaboration over control. And I wouldn't wait for a lawsuit to begin respecting the people who keep this place functioning. There was a pause. Then the chair cleared his throat. Thank you, Sarah. You may wait outside while we deliberate. I stood, nodded to each of them, and left the room. 10 minutes later, I heard raised voices from beyond the wall, not mine, but Arthur's. He was unraveling, deflecting, blaming legal, the CTO, even HR. That was his final gambit. Shift the blame until it evaporated. But this time, it didn't work. 47 a.m. The board chair emerged. Sarah, we've concluded our session. We'd like to speak with you again, privately. I followed him back inside. This time, Arthur was gone. The chair sat down and folded his hands on the table. Effective immediately, he stated. Maxwell Granger has been placed on administrative leave pending a formal review. We'll be issuing a revised statement to the staff, clarifying the situation, and publicly recognizing your contribution to Nexora's infrastructure and recovery. He handed me a printed draft of the official announcement. I read the first line aloud. We acknowledge Sarah Miller's leadership, innovation, and intellectual property as vital to Nexora's success. It hit me harder than I expected, not because I craved the recognition, but because I knew how many women in technology never receive such acknowledgement. How would you like to proceed? The chair asked. I've already agreed to the licensing, I said, but I'd also like to offer consulting services, short-term, no full-time return. I value autonomy, and I want to assist you in implementing safeguards to prevent this from happening to anyone else. He nodded. Consider it done. I stood, and as I turned to leave, he added, Sarah. Yes, you didn't merely protect the system, you saved the company. I gave a soft nod. I know. As I walked out of the room, the weight that had burdened me for days began to lift, not all at once, but in pieces, like armor I no longer needed. In the hallway, Chloe was waiting. He's gone, she whispered. I smiled. He's suspended for now. And you? I looked down the corridor toward the glass walls of the floor I used to inhabit. I'm just getting started. 3 p.m. on Friday. Effective immediately, Maxwell Granger has been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation into recent management decisions, including termination procedures and contractual oversight. Nexora Systems also formally acknowledges Sarah Miller as the architect of our core infrastructure. Her patent and licensing terms are now part of our official operating agreement. We are grateful for her continued partnership and leadership throughout this transition. The message was straightforward, yet within the company, it resonated like a thunderclap. By the time I left the building that day, the silence in the hallways had been replaced by cautious smiles, quick nods, and murmured congratulations from people who hadn't made eye contact with me in weeks. It wasn't vindication I sought. It was acknowledgement, and more than that, it was change. The following Monday, I met with legal again, this time not to address a crisis, but to propose a new framework, a system designed to protect internal innovations and shield employees from leadership misconduct. It included automatic IP contract reviews during leadership transitions, anonymous whistleblower reporting directly to board oversight, and a mentorship program for junior engineers focused on ownership, credit, and boundary setting. I didn't want to simply leave with a victory. I wanted to leave a lasting impact. Within a week, the consulting agreement was finalized. I would remain for 90 days, assisting in system stabilization and preparing the next lead architect to assume responsibility. My terms, my pace. No. Because while I loved the work, the company had changed, and so had I. One afternoon, 2 weeks into my new role, I stood outside the building after a long meeting and noticed a group of interns walking by. One of them, a young woman with thick glasses and a nervous smile, paused when she saw me. Are you Sarah Miller? She asked. I nodded. Her face lit up. I just wanted to thank you. What you did, it's kind of legendary. We talk about it constantly in our Slack channels. You made it acceptable for people to speak up. I smiled, genuinely. Then keep speaking up, I said. Don't wait for permission. She nodded and hurried to catch up with her group, leaving me with a profound and unfamiliar feeling. Not pride, exactly, but something deeper. A legacy. That weekend, I finally permitted myself to exhale. I took a train out of the city, switched off my phone, and watched the world blur past the window. For the first time in months, my mind wasn't consumed by strategies or contingency plans, just silence, peace. I was never seeking power. I was seeking recognition. And when they couldn't provide that, I created my own table instead of begging for a seat at theirs. In the weeks that followed, news gradually emerged. Arthur's leave became permanent. The official explanation cited irreconcilable differences in leadership styles. There were hushed whispers of other complaints, other terminations, quietly swept under the rug before mine. The company's culture began to shift, subtly but perceptibly. Exit interviews were restructured. Panel training now included intellectual property awareness, and for the first time, credit attribution was integrated into engineering milestones. A few executives attempted to revise the narrative. Sarah was always part of the team, one claimed during a panel discussion. We've always valued her expertise on the system, in the credits, and in the story. Months later, I received a handwritten letter from the board chair. Sarah, you transformed how we perceive leadership, not through confrontation, but through unwavering resolve. Thank you for demonstrating what true authority looks like. Jameson Carter. I placed it in the same drawer where I had once stored my severance papers, a reminder of where I had begun and where I refused to end. Today, I lead my own consulting firm. I collaborate with companies seeking more than flashy leadership. They desire sustainable systems and empowered employees. I choose my clients carefully, establish my own boundaries, and never sign anything without meticulously reviewing the fine print. Because ultimately, this wasn't a tale of revenge. It was a story of value, visibility, and the quiet, unwavering strength of someone who refused to be erased when the system attempted to silence her. You don't need to shout to make an impact. You simply need to know your value, and never relinquish that power to someone who doesn't. Because when they dismiss you, believing they've silenced you, they've only ignited the flame.